Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. We're kicking off this week's meeting of the Higher Education Subcommittee promptly today so as to leave enough time for questions of each of our speakers. We're fortunate today to be joined by the Honorable Amy Rockstad Gadara, who's the Secretary of Education. Secretary Gadara comes to the Commonwealth with a background in education data analytics, most recently serving as president of Gadara Strategy. Previously, she was founder, president, and CEO of the Data Quality Campaign, following extensive experience in analytics with nonprofits in the Washington, D.C. area. We welcome you here to be with us today. We will then hear from Wendy Kong and Lee Andis from SHEV to discuss Pell students in Virginia. We are also joined by Dr. Javon Adams-Gaston, president of Norfolk State University, for a conversation about the Virginia College Access Network. Thank you all for joining us today. And just a caution to those of us up here and anyone speaking today, the Senate is recording and live streaming each of its subcommittee meetings, including this one. Today's agenda and presentation materials are available on LIS, and we would ask that everyone speaking today be sure to speak into their microphones so that those viewing from elsewhere can hear what we are saying. So thank you all very much for being with us today. So, Madam Secretary.
By the way,
Oh,
that
you
was
have
a
that.
nice editorial in the Washington Post.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Madam Chairwoman, members of the subcommittee, thank you so much for inviting me today, and it's my honor and privilege to be here to introduce myself to those of you who I haven't had a chance with whom to speak, and to say hello again to those to whom I have had a chance. So thank you again for the opportunity, and I'll just make a couple brief statements about myself and introduce you to me, but also to the administration's viewpoints that you have been hearing a lot about. But most importantly, I would love to hear your questions and answer anything that you would like to talk about. So, hello, sir. Me. So I'm very, very honored and pinching myself still to be in this position, to be nominated to be Secretary of Education for Governor Youngkin. As you know from my bio, I've spent my entire career of 30 years focusing on education, and my own personal belief in education is the reason I'm able to sit at this table is I have had access to a world-class education at every point in my career, starting with being a 13-year grad of public schools. And I'm a deep believer in that the education I received should not be the exception. It should be the norm for every single child in this country, but especially here in the Commonwealth. And our goal in this administration is to build on the culture of excellence that exists in general, both at K-12 and in higher education in Virginia, and to ensure that we are not just in the top quarter, the top quintile, but we are the #1 state in the nation to raise a child and to go to school and to learn, whether you are age 3 or whether you're age 93. We want to make sure that we have a system that is investing in people at all levels, because we know, as Governor Youngkin has said a lot, Virginia needs to be the #1 place to live, to raise a family, and to work, and I'll say, and to learn. And we know that we cannot reach those goals unless we also invest in our people, and that starts with early childhood education and goes throughout our higher education, our workforce development that needs to happen throughout people's lifetimes. So this subcommittee's work is so important because it's ensuring that we are making those investments in people and that we're innovative, that we're aligning our systems from our K-12 system into our post-secondary, both 2-year, 4-year schools, but also into our employers. And how do we make sure that access to quality training and education is available to everyone at an affordable price, that we have access, and to ensure that that opportunity is available to every single learner in Virginia. A little bit about me. I am passionate about education. As the bio said, Madam Chairwoman, I am passionate about the role of information. And so one of the other things that we'll be working on as we talk about excellence in education is that we are going to put a premium on making sure that we have actionable information, not only for policymakers to make decisions, but not only for taxpayers to find out, are we getting a return on our investment, but most importantly for our institutions themselves and for opportunity seekers to make sure that everyone has the information they need to make the best decisions possible accessible for their moment in time, and especially for people who are looking for opportunity and knowing where they can get the training and the education and the skills and the competencies that they need to have success in life in all ways. I'll stop there, and I'm happy to answer any questions, but it's my honor to be with you this afternoon, and thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions?
Yes. I didn't want to just.
You were the last one here. Yes, Senator Norman.
Very nice to see you again, Madam Secretary, and I, along with some others, had the opportunity to be introduced to you when we had the K-12 subcommittee meeting. I realize you've only been here for a short period of time, but based upon your indoctrination to higher education, what would you today identify as the number one pressing issue for our four-year higher education institutions?
Madam Chairwoman, Senator, it's day 10, and we're reminded of that every day by the governor. And what I would say is access, and ensuring that we have access, that we have quality institutions, higher education institutions in the Commonwealth. I know that personally. My husband and I moved to Virginia in 1925 so that he could get his law degree at George Mason. So we are big supporters of Virginia schools, and we started our life in Virginia to access education and to access that degree. And that needs to be available at a reasonable price for people to be able to do. So ensuring that we have the ability to have people to take advantage of the schools and the programs that we have. And that involves, as I said previously, having access to quality information so people can find out where is the best program for what I need in terms of the skills and competencies I want that are aligned to the job skills and that are required for what I want to do, and have better information about labor market information as well as where to get that degree. And then also access to funding to make sure that that is available to people, and that piece of access to education and training is accessible to everyone as well.
Other questions?
Well, no, just, starting with,
Use your mic there.
you're starting with a pretty good situation because two, UVA and William and Mary are ranked in the top 10 public colleges and universities, and if Virginia Tech's not there, it's awful close. So, we've got, of course, how could I forget BMI? But I mean, over the years, our biggest battle has been to try to hold the tuition, down. We're not just the only one dealing with the problem. It's happened everywhere. And, I looked at California, Berkeley as an example, which is usually those top three are Berkeley, Michigan, and UVA in any particular order. Their tuition was roughly about what ours was, but their room and board was almost double, per year. We were at 8 and they were at 15. Our tuitions were like at 13 or 14 for those two schools. But then we have a lot of other schools that that are here today that need help as well. I mean, do you have you said access is important, and I'm glad to hear that. Do you have any ideas on how we can increase access?
Madam Chairwoman, so I'm not prepared to talk specifically about that, Senator, today, but I'm happy to get back in touch.
Sure.
And I would also add, if I could amend my answer, it's access, and part of access to information is also alignment, right? Of how do we also ensure that our institutions are also aligned and getting feedback from the real world, from employers, about what it is that their graduates are prepared to do, and that. So that also, so information at all levels coming in, so make sure we have consumers have access to information, but also access as well to feedback information from our employer base to make sure that our schools are part of an aligned system preparing people for success.
By the way, for the people in this room, if you didn't get a chance to see it, I think it was either last Sunday or Saturday, the Washington Post had an outstanding editorial on our new secretary.
Thank you, sir.
they don't often have anything good to say about anybody. So, Democrat or Republican. So,
Yes, sir. Thank you.
My question has to do with historically, black colleges and universities have been severely underfunded in comparison to other public institutions in the state. What will be the effort of this administration to ensure that HBCUs receive the funding that they have not been receiving in the past?
Madam Chairwoman, will be a priority of the Youngkin administration. As you all saw, we have raised up to the cabinet level an office on equity, opportunity, on inclusion, diversity, opportunity, and inclusion. And this administration is going to recognize that, not just in words, but also in how we act and what we do. And so ensuring that people and communities that have not been served and have not had the access that they need to be prepared for success in life, we are going to do everything possible to partner and to ensure that that happens.
Other question, John?
Madam Chair. I'm Senator John Edwards from Roanoke. You were president of Gadara Strategies. Are
Yes,
you
sir.
still doing that at work recently?
No, Madam Chairman, Senator, no. So that I closed down that consulting business in December when I received the offer to come here.
It's this past December?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And where did that operate? You lived in Northern Virginia?
So we were in Northern Virginia, and then the last 14 years we've lived in Minnesota, where my husband is from.
in where?
Minnesota.
Where's that?
Way far away from the ocean.
You're talking about Minnesota,
Yeah. So,
the Garrison Keillor. You're a Lutheran or a Catholic. You got to be one of the two if you live in Minnesota.
so actually, sir, it feels really good. I'm an Episcopalian, and it's like being a Lutheran in Minnesota. You can't cross the street without finding an Episcopal church here. So,
I know.
So-
I haven't been Lutheran, but anyway. You went to college at a university in New Jersey?
I'm sorry. So
You go to college in New Jersey?
I did.
What's the name of the school?
Oh, I know that we share this, sir. Yes, go Tigers.
What year did you graduate from Princeton?
1989.
I'm much older. And you got a master's in public policy from the Kennedy School. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Do you have any other graduate program other than that?
No, sir.
Okay. What did you major in at Princeton?
In the Woodrow Wilson School of International Public Affairs.
Great school. They changed the name now.
They have. I still graduated from the Woodrow Wilson School. So,
It's a great school.
Less political correctness.
yeah.
I've been pushing since I was elected to reduce tuition. It went up in the early 90s about 64% in 4 or 5 years, something like that. And tuition is still too high for Virginia residents. We had a policy, and in my second year, we got a policy passed that wasn't really enacted, but a policy to go back to the 1/3, 2/3 split. The state would pay 2/3, the students would pay 1/3. How do we do that going forward? And I noticed that Virginia puts in about $6,100 per student. States around us give a lot more than Virginia does. We've underfunded higher education for a long time, despite the fact we have some great schools here. William & Mary, UVA, top out there, basically Ivy schools. There's a place called in Lexington. What's the name of that?
BMI.
And the other schools, they're all wonderful schools. We have, I think, probably the best schools in the country on average than any other state in the country. What can we do to keep get the tuition down and maintain the quality, or even get the quality up? How can we do this?
And Senator, so I don't have specifics to share with you today, but I know that this is central to ensuring that we provide that access, and we do that. And we look forward to working with you to discuss ideas, and I'm happy to come down at your convenience and discuss ways that we can do that.
Love
But
to talk to you further.
okay, it matters, but thank you.
And then we can talk about Princeton.
I would love that too, sir. So,
This will be the last question because I know that you are on a very tight schedule
Thank
here
you,
this
ma'am.
afternoon. Yes, Cecil.
Secretary Gadara, if you go back and you do the research, back in 1998, we passed a thing called car tax relief. And it got capped 5 years later at $950 million a year. And had Brandon Bell, state senator from Roanoke, not capped it, last year would have been $2.4 billion. If you go back and you take a look, and this is why a lot of us are very apprehensive about cutting taxes, that was when the tuition started to take off. And we lost the ability to keep it real low. $950 million a year. And, to me, I've had nobody email me about needing a tax cut. Now, I come from a well-to-do area, no question about it. But there are ways that we can help the people who do need that without, putting ourselves where 3-4 years later, when we don't know what the economy is going to look like, we're in a mess. But if you go back and check, that's when it started to take off. We lost the ability to keep it low. So, that's just one aspect of that. And I'd prefer to dump more money into that than giving tax breaks to people like myself or Senator Norman or people like that who don't need it.
Thanks.
That wasn't a question.
No, it wasn't
Is that a question? Isn't that true?
But we're prepared to help.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for coming, and look forward to seeing you, I think, later in the week.
I think so. So
Okay.
thank you, and thank you so much to everyone. And I'm sorry that I have to leave and not listen to the rest of the speakers, but thank you for the invitation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Dr. J, I think we're going to switch things up and have you go next.
Well, thank you so very much for having me today. I want to say thank you to Madam Chair, Senator Locke. I'd like to say thank you to all of the members who are here today, Senator Howell, Senator Saslaw, Senator Ruff, and Senator Edwards, and I think that Senator Norman just walked out for a second. I'm Dr. Javon Adams Gaston. They call me Dr. J. Long story, but it's been around a long time. And I'm the president of Norfolk State University. I'm the 7th president there. I want to thank you for inviting me to talk to you about the VCAN program, the Virginia College Affordability Network program, that we received funding for in January of 2021 and had our first class enter in fall 2021. Our expectation was that we would be able to have 75 students from the 25-mile radius to start that first class. We were able to have 203 students who were able to benefit from the VCAN funding that allowed Pell Grant students who are Pell Grant eligible, to be able to have tuition support to come to Norfolk State University. We have second to the highest percentage of Pell Grant students at Norfolk State University. We're just about 70%. We're 69.5% Pell Grant recipients at the university. So as you know, affordability is really important to our population. What I would say is it's essential for our students who want to attend college and not have all of the difficulties that get in the way of students being successful. One of those things is when we have students who don't have the resources, many of our students end up working off campus, and in that work get lost because it's not the priority typically of the places that they work that they are able to adjust their working times to go to class or study for exams. And so this allows our students to have an opportunity to get started. This also means that we are in our community creating a change for families. Because I always say when we have students who are successful at higher education, they not only change their own lives, but they change their family tree. And so that is really what we're doing. There is an opportunity. So let me say a few things about that freshman class that came in 2021. We had 203 students. Students chose pre-nursing, biology, social work, fine arts, general business as their top 5 majors. 17% came from Norfolk, 11% from Hampton, 17% from Newport News, 12% from Portsmouth, and 8% from Suffolk, 15% from Virginia Beach, and just below 0.5% from Yorktown and 0.5% from Carrollton. If we continue and we agree that the VCAN program is a major pathway for changing the trajectory of families, then we will be able to see the kind of success that enhances communities, not simply success for the individuals, but really changing communities. As we talk about expansion to the 45-mile radius, and I strongly support that opportunity, we know that it will help increase our in-state population of first-time, full-time students. We know that the cities that will be impacted beyond the 25-mile radius would be Gloucester, Isle of Wight, Matthews, Northampton, and Surrey. And we know that by expanding that radius, it will give access to more Pell-eligible students who can take advantage of the program. You've been talking today about accessibility and affordability. It is critical that we have students who are talented, who have the abilities, but need the development and need the support in order to be successful. There are challenges, as you can imagine, with these kind of programs. I have had the opportunity over the years at many institutions I came from, many R1 institutions, where I created programs for students who needed the support that they need. Bridge programs, there's lots of data that tells us bridge programs work, and that if we do bridge programs, the likelihood of students staying successful, being able to maintain into the second year and to graduate are much higher. We need bridge programs for these students that work together with what we call intrusive advising and intrusive leadership support. Why intrusive? If you're a first-generation student, unlike many of us who had parents who were college educated, it's hard to navigate the system and understand what you don't know. You just don't know what you don't know. So how do we help those students learn that? We bring them in the summer. We have a 4-week program or a 6-week program for them where they're focused on 2 classes, 1 or 2 classes, usually either English or math, so that they can get a leg up and also transition to the university. They need to live on the campus because they need to move away from the environment and give themselves an opportunity to immerse themselves in college, which they may not be able to do during the academic year because they may not be able to afford to live on campus. So we want to ensure that we have what we call this intensive support for the students, and we want to be sure that that happens both in the classroom and outside of the classroom. So we need, obviously, people who can do that work. That is a professional. So advising is not something that you just pick up and say, I do. It's actually a profession that you go to school and learn and are trained for. So we want that on the inside of the classroom, and individuals who are professionals in leadership and development, also a profession. So if we are able to have our students focus on English and math, and now is more critical than ever, and let me say why. We've had 2 years of COVID pandemic, students trying to learn virtually, sometimes in person. Lots of things have slid. We want to get back to having them close whatever gaps exist so that they can use their talents to move forward. The final thing that I would say is we have the opportunity to designate funds for first-year students who are new and entering. one of the things we can really think about with VCAN is it possible to do this for first year entering transfer students also, so that they have the opportunity to complete, all of whom would be Pell eligible. It is both Norfolk State University and Virginia State University who are working to make sure these students have the opportunities in the VCAM program. So we are so grateful for all of the support that we have, and we hope that there will be the opportunity to expand the program. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. J. Could you remind us what, you have 203 students, what are the resources that are provided to these students that are entering?
Right now, we have 2 full-time staff members who are working with them from the time they come in. They are required to report to these individuals. They have small groups that they work with. We just need to keep expanding that. We would like to make sure that some of these students have the opportunity to live on campus. We know that for many of them, that would be an opportunity to be more successful. That would also give them an opportunity to do the things that we're hoping they can do in terms of leadership and development. We also are looking for ways that we can hire them on campus, because one of the things we're doing with students who are hired on campus is every student has a set of outcomes that are attached to the work that they do. So right now we have those 2 people. We need to expand it. 2 people for 200 students is a heavy load.
Other questions? Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you so very much.
Okay, Wendy. And Lee. You both up.
Let me get start right in. Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank you so much for inviting us to come speak with you this afternoon. I think we have a very strong theme going on this afternoon in today's meetings. We've heard it from both of our prior speakers, trying to address access and affordability in higher education. So Chev would like to come to you today to talk more about our Pell recipients. These are among our most vulnerable students. And any discussion on higher education really should start at the top and work down. Commonwealth Virginia wants to ensure that we have a higher education system that is equitable, affordable, and transformative. We do have 2 specific goals, one of which is to have the most educated state in the country, and to have at least 70% of our population have some sort of post-secondary degree, whether it be a college degree or a workforce credential. To reach either one of these goals, it's imperative that we address our low-income and Pell-eligible populations. These are the populations that are least represented and provide the best opportunity not only to assist those students, but also for the Commonwealth to meet its goals. The Pell Grant is the largest federal need-based grant. The awards range from $650 to nearly $6,500. So it's a substantial investment by the federal government. As far as financial strength with the families, they are those that are primarily in the low income, which is 0 to 200% of federal poverty level, ranging from $0 to $50,000 or $55,000 of income annually. And this is just one of the many resources that these students use to afford higher education. Recently, we all have seen a report from Ed Reform Now, looking at this on a nationwide study on our eligibility or Pell enrollments in our states. National average per state is 33% of Pell enrollments are institutions have 33% of their enrollment represented by Pell-eligible students. This is a combination of in-state and out-of-state students. Important to make that distinction when looking at Virginia. And according to that study, Virginia had just 26% of its enrollment represented by Pell-eligible students. Virginia then ranks on that survey 41st in the country. That's not a ranking that we're all happy with. A little bit of context, Virginia also ranks 41st in the country in terms of poverty rate. And if you add in our private nonprofits, our enrollment percentage goes up to 32.7%. But I think that all that said, it's imperative that we address this Pell eligible students, try to get more of them have both access and affordability into higher education. We certainly have room to grow. We have a list of by institution, the percent of enrollment represented by Pell eligible students. It's a 5-year trend. This trend line suggests, the list of the institutions suggests that we do have a lot of room to grow. The institutions, public 4-year institutions, this report shows in-state students, which that's the group that we have most opportunity to impact. The public 4-year institutions had 29% of their enrollment represented by Pell eligible students, but the range goes from anywhere from 14% to 72%. So we have large disparities among the institutions in terms of Pell eligible students enrolled. We have been looking at the institutions that have particularly low Pell Grant, Pell eligible student enrollments, and we'll be talking about those more in a few moments. But I think that we do definitely see room for the Commonwealth to grow this enrollment. This past fall, yes, sir.
Do you have a breakdown on where these students are coming from in the state?
I believe we could do that. We don't have something readily available.
No, I was just curious.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Madam Chair, this past fall, Chev released a new report called Trends in Financial Aid. In that report, we do a lot of focus on unmet need. Unmet need is the cost of attendance, cost to attend college, tuition, fees, room and board, etc. Less grants, less the family's financial strength, or EFC, expected family contribution. We find that low-income students across the board have a high unmet need, but also lower completion rates. So those two kind of go in hand. It's a strong correlation. That's one reason why Chev has come up with a very strong request on financial aid. We'll talk about that more in just a moment as well. In the next report, we have a list by institution of the unmet need. The low-income students were represented by 0 to 200% of poverty level, middle income 2 to 400% of poverty level, and high income 400 or higher percent of poverty level. Just for context, I know we're talking about Pell eligible students. There's a strong, heavy correlation between low income and Pell eligible. So for our purposes of our study and our review this afternoon with you, we find that across the board at every institution, these low-income students have the highest unmet need. Now, that does not mean that they aren't receiving a lot of financial aid. They also have the largest amount of aid being received for these students. The problem is that the aid that they're receiving is still not sufficient to overcome the differences in the financial strength between the families, between low and middle income and high income. You see the numbers there. We look at what the state has been able to do. Chev has had some very strong financial aid requests, and the General Assembly has been very good about providing some large increases in the governor's office for financial aid. So we had some strong investments in this area. That has resulted in some good news. More students are getting aid, and the average award is increasing. Unfortunately, the purchasing power of the grant has been eroding. In 2007, you see the gap, the average award of $1,900, almost $2,000, average tuition fees $6,100. That is 32%. So the average award in 2007 was 32% of the tuition and fees, still a $4,100 gap. Fast forward to 2020, even though the award has increased, that award is only 23% of tuition and fees, with over a $9,800 gap. So we've been heavy investments. That we've seen some improvement, but still the purchasing power has been eroding. So in order to enroll more Pell eligible students, which I think we all agree is something that's an imperative, Dr. J used the word critical. I don't disagree at all. That is largely financial, but there are other barriers as well. And Wendy Kahn will be talking to you more about what is happening across the state.
Good afternoon. And, similar to Secretary Gadara, we like to look at the data first and then try to figure out where to go from there. So Lee was really trying to point out some of the things that we've been looking at over the last few years in terms of, how can we help students? So what we thought we'd talk about today, I think you took my, oh, there you go, is, how can we think about improving Pell enrollments and breaking it down to what institutions can do, what statewide initiatives are out there, and then also as you get into your budget and planning process, what you can think about as some items. Some of them mentioned earlier, but we'll talk a little bit about each one of those in a little bit more detail. For institutions, we did reach out to the institutions that had these lower Pell enrollments, and dealing with the issue of Pell enrollments and access and completion, each institution would have a different approach. As you saw earlier, the NSU, and heard from Dr. J, when you have about a 70% Pell enrollment, you're really focused not on trying to get more in. Of course, you do want to serve more, but completion and getting them to stay. When you're a low enrollment, with some of the other institutions we've had listed here, CNU, VMI, UVA, JMU, and William & Mary, they're looking at ways to attract students to come in. And so they're having different approaches because those have usually pretty high completion rates once they can get them in the door. So in terms of approaches, for the institutions that have these low enrollments, some examples of things that we've heard them starting to work on, and some have already had in place for a while, outreach programs to K-12. At CNU, they have a captain's program that's actually just starting at Newport News and working with those public schools. At JMU, they have a Valley Scholar program working with 7 school divisions and school districts in that area. So these programs that can build K-12 partnerships and provide more opportunities and allow students to see that they can go to college, gives them that opportunity. And most of these programs are trying to build awareness. They hope they'll go there, but they're also doing support services to students in high school to even allow them to pursue other opportunities as well. Scholarships and promise programs are also helpful when you're talking about a low-income student. Cost is a factor, so having some sort of commitment that will meet 100% of need. UVA has that commitment on their website. Of course, each institution, it's hard to do if they don't have enough resources. So thinking about aid, it really does help them commit more so that students have some reassurance and stability while they're in school to know that they can keep coming back year to year and not know that their costs may be going up and down. In addition, student support services on campus, you heard from Dr. J about things like intrusive advising and other things. So once a student gets there, especially if they're first generation, they may not have a parent to turn to or other friends of theirs who had parents too, to know what to do and how to navigate. So support services once they get there to help them think about what do I do, who do I go to, and just navigating how to deal with registration, financial aid, what to do if you aren't doing so well in a course. So having those support services on campus, and also the development of student cohort groups. We've started to hear a lot about that. The bridge programs, William & Mary is starting a first-generation low-income student organization so that they can, have a peer-to-peer network and how they can work together. So those are some things that we've heard that institutions are doing to really help students. Some of these examples are the ones with the low Pell enrollments. Next week we'll try a little more about what institutions are doing when they have more Pell enrollments, but they're trying to think about completion and retaining them once they're there. In terms of options to improve that enrollment in terms of statewide initiatives, we can't expect every institution to go to all the 400 plus high schools that are out there. That's unreasonable. So statewide, how do we raise awareness for students to think about their options and where to go? I want to mention that just this year, we've launched a new partnership with DOE. We've always been working with them, but we actually have a shared position. The person is at DOE, but their role is really to think about post-secondary and how they can help high schools and middle schools think about how to help the counselors, help the students look at options and to get more information out to the schools and get those to students and parents. So when we talk about access, and we heard that with Secretary Gadara, getting the word out is really important. So finding that bridge between post-secondary and K-12 is really important to us. So we think this new role will be very helpful. We also have a few targeted initiatives. We have our federal Gear Up program, which is in 13 school divisions. And they actually work with specific high schools and middle schools to help particularly schools with low-income students there in terms of tutoring, advising, follow them as a cohort all the way through to high school. They do these bridge programs, campus tours, things like that. And also we help with these 1, 2, 3, go to college. So I know it's not as easy as 3 steps to college. We try to say it's a little bit easier than maybe it is. But, we host a college application week. We usually have over 100 high schools participating. Usually fees are waived for low-income students that week. So removing barriers to students who may not think about, I don't know if I can afford this $100 application fee. The high schools all get involved. The students do it while they're there. And they're applying, and a lot of our colleges participate, and some are actually doing on-site admissions right during that time. So students are kind of seeing something that's tangible right away and not just waiting to see if they'll be accepted. And also pay, very important when we talk about FAFSA and low-income students. When we talk about Pell and low-income students, the way they get to it is by completing a FAFSA. And in Virginia, we've had not as good completion of FAFSA rates, so we really want to increase awareness for FAFSA completion. It gives them access to the Pell. It gives them access to loans. And often for schools, it's also a requirement to be able to get scholarships on campus. So filling that form out is really important. And so we pivoted last year. There was virtual activities going on. We actually provide one-on-one virtual advising. We were the first in the nation to offer this. We had all of our access providers. They all started collaborating in ways to help students and families. They signed up online. They were able to talk to somebody and walk through a FAFSA. We're hoping to continue that as well this year. We also have a pop-up event in Richmond. This was our Title I schools. A lot of them are in Richmond. And they had some of the lowest completion rates last year, so we're partnering. We're going to have that behind the Science Museum. We'll send you an invite if you'd like to come by. And that's actually happening in February. So a lot that we're trying to do to raise awareness and, again, to support access. Finally, what can you think about as you move into your budget and planning processes? You've obviously heard a lot about aid. If you think back to that unmet need table we were showing you, some of those institutions have lower unmet need in the low-income category, and some have some pretty high amounts. The money that we had put in there was to also help support some of those institutions with really high unmet need for those low-income students. So while we're increasing it, we're also targeting it and trying to make some adjustments to help those institutions. You heard about the College Affordability Network. We also have existing programs like the G3, the Workforce Credential. All of these provide access opportunities and help low-income students. Each of those programs are targeted towards helping students think about programs and degrees and then get into jobs, what we heard about earlier from Secretary Gadara. In the policy and funding area, we talked to you about the cost and funding needs study. Of course, that's underway, but we are thinking about incentives and ways that we can emphasize in our funding to support how, to look at ways that we can structure the model to support more low-income students and recognize that as an added cost. So there's some opportunities there. Of course, we heard about that earlier, this buying power of tuition and fees growing, and Lee shared those numbers that we've lost some of that buying power. So, we want to balance out investments in aid, but also figuring out ways to keep tuition and fees low. And so ways that we can support investments in operations as well. If institutions are able to keep that tuition and fee low, then that'll give you more purchasing power with the aid that you make those investments in. And of course, we'll talk a little bit more next week about some more completion efforts, but if you've got institution initiatives that have been requested and they're looking to improve completion, that's obviously a good return investment as well for the state in terms of being able to keep those students, get them to graduate and find good jobs. With that, we'll be happy to answer any questions.
Are there questions?
No, ma'am.
doesn't have any questions.
Well, Peter's behind me if you would like to.
I might have questions for Peter.
Senator Howe? No, you didn't have a question? Oh, okay, all right. So you all must have done a fabulous job.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity. Really appreciate it.
So that exhausts our agenda for today. So,
Exhausted.
it's been an exhausting day.
More ways than one.
So thank you all, and we will see you next week.
Okey dokey.